Hey guys, Mr. Edwards here, Centreville High School Automotive Technology. Today we're working on a 2003 Subaru Forester, and we're doing a video on headlight lens refinishing. Now, headlights obviously light the road as you're going down it at night, but over time the lenses of the headlight on many cars get foggy looking, just like these ones here. That's a combination of plastic aging, because modern headlights have a plastic lens on them. So that's a combination of plastic aging along with the salt, sand, just stuff on the road kicking up and getting on this lens and contaminating it. So the procedure we're going to do today is going to be a light sanding of this surface to clean it up and get these contaminants off of here, and then applying a UV protectant clear coat to prevent this from happening again, hopefully for a long time. Let's take a look at these lights and talk about this procedure. So this Subaru, being that it's a 2003, so it's over 15 years old, and it has over 180,000 miles on it, these lights have seen a good bit. They've shined bright for years and years, and over time they've gotten hazy looking. Many cars this happens to. Usually it happens to both of them because they're identical to each other and the plastic just ages and gets contamination on it. And this will cause your lights to not shine as brightly as they did when the car was new, or as brightly as they need to be safe. And because of that, it can cause the vehicle to not pass our Virginia State safety inspection. So if you take your car in with lenses that look foggy like these ones here, there's a chance that your inspector is going to put a rejection sticker right here on your car and tell you that you got to fix this. So this is something that is relatively easy to do, and you definitely want to make sure that you have bright headlights on your car. Let's take a look at the first thing we need to do. So the first thing we need to do in the procedure for refinishing headlight lenses is to protect the surface around the headlight. Like I said, we're going to do some light sanding on this, and then we're going to be spraying a clear coat, protectant on it. And we don't want to cause any damage to the paint surface of the car around the headlight. So we need to mask it off with paper and masking tape, which I'm going to do here in just a minute, being really careful, and I'll bring you guys in, to get all the corners, because we don't want to cover up part of the light and then not clear that up, because it'll be very obvious, if we have one part that's nice and clear looking and one part that's still faded. So we want to be really careful to tuck our masking paper that you guys will see in a minute around all these edges and corners so that our headlight is completely accessible, but the rest of the surface around it is protected. So let's take a look at what we've got to do here. So I have special masking paper here. It's meant for this purpose, and what we're going to do is tape it as close as we can get, tucked around the edge of this light all the way around, using masking tape to protect the surface around the light. Just like this. Now, I will tell you guys, my masking job is not the prettiest in the world. However, this is only going to be on here for a few minutes. All it's doing is protecting the surface around the light and enabling us to focus all of our refinishing effort on the part that we want to clean up without causing damage to anything around it. So that's exactly what we've done. The lens is completely exposed, including every corner, every surface, everywhere. And notice you don't see any red paint of the car exposed around the light to potentially get damaged. Our next step is going to be to wipe the lens down to get any sort of bugs or road stuff or anything, any sort of contaminants off the lens, and then we're going to begin our sanding process. So you're going to see me keep pulling up this spray bottle of water here throughout this process. I recommend you start with a pretty full spray bottle of just plain water out of the sink, because you're going to need it. Spray the lens down with some water, and then just wipe it down real good. just like that. Now see, that made it look better right there, but as soon as it starts to dry, as you can see it's starting to do up there, it goes back to that faded look. We're gonna clean it up so that it looks nice and shiny permanently. Our next step is gonna be our first of 2 sanding steps. We're gonna use 2 different grits of sandpaper. Now, sandpaper comes rated by grit. And if you look at the back of a sheet of sandpaper, it's gonna have a number on it. This right here is 1000 grit sandpaper. This right here is 600 grit sandpaper. The lower the number, the closer the number is to 0, the rougher the sandpaper is, okay? So 600 is gonna be a lot, well, not a lot, but considerably rougher than 1000 grit. 3000 grit, let's just say as an example, if we were using that, would be even softer than the 1000 grit. So that's a little bit about the rating of sandpaper if you didn't know. We're gonna start with our 600 grit first to get as much of the really heavy duty contaminants off this lens. Then we're gonna polish it with the 1000 grit as our second step. All of our sanding for this is gonna be what's called wet sanding, which is pretty straightforward in its name. It's done while the surface that you're sanding is wet. So we're gonna spray it down with this just plain water out of the sink again. And then you're gonna start, like I said, with the 600 grit on the lens, getting every inch of it, every corner, every nook and cranny as much as possible. You're not putting a ton of force onto this. You're letting the sandpaper do most of the work, but you just wanna guide it around and let it clean up the lens. And you can see this milky residue coming off of here with the water. That's all those contaminants and the degraded plastic surface on here that we are cleaning up. So we're gonna get every inch of this lens, and if we need to, if it starts to get kind of hard to move the sandpaper, we can spray it with some water again to give it as much ability to do its job and clean up this lens as possible. If you happen to by chance tear or damage your masking paper, I mean, it's gonna get wet, but if you happen to tear it, stop, replace that paper, put some tape on it, whatever. That way it doesn't potentially damage the paint underneath. I'm trying to be easy on my edges here while still getting the sanding done so that we hopefully don't have to retape it. And again, you want to get every inch of this lens. Now our next step, once we have completed our 600 grit sanding, spray the whole lens down again with fresh water. And then just take a nice clean towel and wipe it down. I'm using a microfiber towel here because it's nice and soft. And you can see our lens is looking kind of scuffed up now. Obviously, that's not the prettiest look in the world, and we're certainly not going to leave it like that. Our next step is going to be, again, with more water, using 1000 grit sandpaper, which is considerably softer than our 600 grit, to polish the lens and get it as smooth as possible before we put our UV protectant coat on it, clear coat. Again, get into every corner as much as possible. You're not putting a ton of force on this. You're just letting the sandpaper do the work. You're just guiding it. Get all the edges. Add a little more water. If your masking paper starts to pull away a little bit, you can tuck it back in so we don't damage the paint, like I said. All right, and then once we've done our 1000 grit sanding, again, spray it down. That's why I said start with a nice full bottle of water, because you're going to use it, especially between both headlights. Wipe it down till it's dry. Get all the film that we've scrubbed off of it. Now, our next step is going to be to use a UV protectant headlight restoration clear coat spray. It's basically like clear coat paint, but it's resistant to UV rays from the sun. And just like spray paint, you need to shake it up good, which is what I'm going to do now. And once you have it shaken up, make sure, again, last chance to double check that all of your masking is clear of the light, but is protecting the surface around it. And you're going to go ahead and do light, short sprays on the light, as you'll see me do. I'm not holding it in one place for any period of time because it'll start to run. You don't want drips in your headlight. That won't look very nice. Light, short sprays, constantly moving. Watch. And then once you've coated the entire light, stop and look at it from different angles, up top, down below, see if there's any spots that need a little bit of touch up. So once you're at this point here, obviously it looks considerably better than it did when we started. We've got our nice UV clear coat protectant on it. It's wet. It's like spray paint. It's not dry immediately. We don't want to touch it. We want to let it sit here and dry. Obviously, if you have one light that looked like this, the other one's most likely going to look like it. You saw it did on this car. So we're going to go ahead and start working on that light. But just for some comparison for you guys, this is what the lights looked like before. This is the light on the other side that we haven't touched yet. And this is what they can look like if a headlight restoration is done on them. So while this is sitting here drying and curing, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to that other light, obviously. The procedure is exactly the same. So I'm not going to walk you guys through it again and again, but once this has dried and gotten to a point where we can safely touch it, we're going to go ahead and pull our masking tape and paper off around it, and I will bring you guys back as soon as we're able to do that. So now our refinished and UV coated headlight lens has cured or dried to a point where we can safely touch around it. I'm still not going to touch it directly because I need to let it sit and actually really set for several hours. But I can safely be around it, and if the paper were to brush it, let's say, it wouldn't damage it. This process of the initial drying, I usually let it sit about 20 minutes, which is what's recommended, and then go ahead and take the paper off around it, which is what we're going to do now. I still try to be as careful as possible. And now all of our masking paper and tape is off. You want to make sure you get every little piece of tape and everything from the edges everywhere. That way there's nothing that's stuck up under the headlight or anything, because you don't want to have a piece of masking tape sticking out from a headlight that looks as nice and pretty as this. As you can see, the surface around the light, the paint of the car, was completely untouched by our restoration efforts. It was completely covered up the whole time. And this headlight looks really nice compared to what we started with. Nice bright headlight. High beams, low beams, nice and bright. So that's it, guys. You saw what we started with before we refinished this headlight lens, and you see what we have now. Hopefully, you can see the dramatic difference here. This headlight is guaranteed to shine much, much brighter than it did going down the road, be able to see everything that's coming ahead of you, and most importantly, pass Virginia State safety inspection, because it shines as bright as it is designed to now, and it did when the car was new. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and learned something. Make sure you fill out the questions that go along with it, and I'll look forward to talking to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.